We're back. Lewis, I got a bomb for you. You ready?
Drop the bomb.
Okay, I'm ready to drop the bomb. Okay, are you set for this bomb?
Yep.
I watched this thing about a man who went to do a documentary out in the Amazon. Not like Amazon.co.uk. I mean like the actual rainforest, right? And he was
got lost in a warehouse.
No, he got lost in a warehouse, and they didn't have his GPS tracker to make sure he was doing his work, and there
was only robots there. He had to he almost got run over.
And then 3 years later,
he got
Mrs.
out.
Darcy from 525
himself.
Coventry Lane had a new dishwasher delivered, and when she opened it, he came tumbling out. It was just bones.
No.
Somehow managed to trap himself in a new appliance.
Some of that food that you can buy on Amazon.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He was doing that. No, so this guy was out in the Amazon. He was
gummy worms.
He was visiting tribes of people who had no concept of modern
gummy
life.
Worms. No.
Right? So they lived out there, completely lived off the land and stuff. They didn't. They had no real contact with the outside world. And they
ate shit to make it rain.
They'd always been that way. Yeah, they got Joey Jojo to eat shit to make it rain and stuff. All of that stuff. And it was really interesting because he sort of said, and when he was questioned about it, he sort of said, I always thought that it was going to be this sort of Garden of Eden type thing. You turn up to these places and you just see all these people living naturally. They don't have any, mod cons. They have no concept of the modern world, the outside world or whatever. They just live in these little isolated, insular little tribes out in the Amazon, the way they always have, sort of thing. And he thought, he was going to see people frolicking around in waterfalls and stuff. Because you do, right? You sort of imagine that that's going to be the case. But he said, and it was really interesting, he said, it's like a battlefield out there. These people's lives are not great. They die very early because they don't have any medicine or any sort of concept of medicine. And like you said, they probably would try to eat shit if they thought that would make them better or cure them or whatever. And also,
that's a throwback to a previous episode, by the way. I'm not being massively offensive towards natives, by the way, implying that they're some sort of primitive people, but...
Look at how many of these guys I'm packing in here. But also, he said...
They don't have toothbrushes and things
like this. No, they don't have anything like that. And he said it's also a thing where, they venture off, if they go hunting or whatever. And sometimes they'll happen across a logging camp or some sort of, thing to do with modern society. It could be some sort of plantation or
so they are exposed to
so they're exposed to it, but in the most negative possible way, because they'll happen across these places and they'll see all these machines and tools that they don't understand, but they might spot a machete and they might be like, fuck, we could really use that, let's take it, because they don't have any concept of stealing or anything like that, because they're a little bit sort of, I guess, primitive, if you like, because of the isolated lifestyle and everything. And oftentimes they'll get shot by people who are working at the logging camp.
Oh my god!
Their lives are just made into a misery because of these small influences of the outside world, and just how fucking hard it is for these people to actually just live. In general, without any sort of, we live very comfortable lives now, don't we? I mean, oftentimes we're on the internet complaining about we shouldn't eat too much sugar or whatever, and obviously life for these people is so far. Beyond that, they don't give a fuck about any of that stuff. All they care about is shooting a deer so that their family can eat for the first time in a month.
We are animals, okay? Animals out there in the wild have a tough fucking time. It gets cold. They don't wear any clothing. They are literally naked, walking around, and they have to fight for their lives every day.
But not sexy naked either. National Geographic naked.
Many animals have what we would consider to be extremely traumatic existences, because every day their lives are in danger. They have very short lives. We are, even humans as animals, our lifespan without, modern medical care and things like this, especially teeth, is a good example. But I guess most animals are really and plants to some extent are only really designed to live, to have children and then protect those children into adulthood to some extent. So I mean, we get fertile in our teens, and then by mid-20s, those children have grown up. So we're really not as we didn't really evolve necessarily to live much longer than that. I mean, when you understand the way evolution works, it works by you just have to live long enough to pass on your genes, right?
Yeah.
To some extent, evolving in a big community, evolving in a big society of people, it doesn't hurt that you live older, but living older doesn't necessarily pass itself on, right? So, for example, unless you're actually having kids at like 100 years old, being 100 years old is not a selective trait. Does that make sense? Because you've already passed on those genes during your fertile years when you were 30, when you were 25. So animals, they have a tough time out there, and these Aboriginal tribes have a tough time. It must be very stressful and different, and yes, we do have it so good compared to them.
It's true.
It's not even a comparison, really. It's, we worry about eating sugar and stuff, whereas these people worry about eating at all. And it's not even a, we're very lucky, but also in the same way, I'm not sure that. I mean, we refer to these people as primitive people, and they are obviously basic in the fact that they don't really experience the world in the same way we do. Partly because they are not. I think sometimes that some of the things they're exposed to are probably more powerful than we. Like, in many ways, we are defined by our formative years, our education, the things we've learned, the experiences we've been told, and stories, are a very good way to learn. So, a very common way. Wow, you've made a swimming pool. That's really cool.
I know. I'm just fucking having like a hose pipe fight with all of these dudes now. Check this out. Fucking
I didn't realize. I just caught up.
Clean yourselves, filthy assholes. Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice.
I know.
Sorry. I'm getting off. I'm getting confused.
I'm getting off on this.
It's the car wash.
Oh, the water and the slimes.
It's
really
the cat wash.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So another thing
wash,
that was interesting about this guy, he was saying that one of the biggest threats to these people is people from the outside making first contact with them, because they've developed no immunity to the things that we have either. So through our modern life and medicine and stuff like that, we get colds all the time, we get the flu, we get all sorts of shit from the people that we're surrounded by, and we have everything that we need to keep ourselves comfortable and healthy and everything. We can recover from it all, but these people don't have any immunity to that kind of stuff, and it's not uncommon for somebody to make first contact with them and for just a couple of them to just die. Like hundreds of them just suddenly die because they catch the flu or whatever, and they have no way of dealing with it. It's fucking terrible, man. It's crazy. I couldn't believe it. Like, all these things that I'd never thought about relating to people who just sort of are out there, and there's not many of them left. There's only about 6,000 people left in the world who live like that. But it's really weird, isn't it? It just made me sort of think, because I used to sort of say, like when you're a teenager and you're growing up and you really don't want to work and you really don't want to do anything, and you say, fuck, I'm just going to go out in the woods and live out there. That's all I need. Just need a little vegetable patch and a cabin, and I'll live off the land or whatever. But the reality is you'd probably be dead by the time you're 25 if you did that, because it's fucking hard out there.
Mentally speaking, though, I think that it's got to be difficult, because almost in a way these people have been isolated from civilization. I don't want to say they're feral, but in a way, when you see, for example, I saw a documentary about like feral children in Russia, like some girl had, I don't know, been abandoned, a baby had been abandoned and was sort of brought up, I don't want to say by wolves or whatever, but kind of, I don't know, you see it when they get mistreated or things like this. So they get this very limited view of what the world is, and a very stunted education, Or, imagine if you could only, if for the first 10 years of your life, the only thing you'd eaten was a potato,
Yeah.
You've been deprived of what the world had to offer. I think, like, mentally, in a way, these tribes are... I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Because I think people can be happy with some of this basic stuff, and I think a lot of people would argue not to disturb them, not to mess with their way of life, not to, just to leave them in their natural habitat. A lot of people would defend them to the letter to do that. But I think by neglect, what you're doing there is you're saying, okay, well, in that case, we'll just allow them to all have all their teeth fall out by 30. We'll allow them to kill each other because they don't know better or they don't speak each other's language.
Well,
we'll allow them to do all these things, which I think are quite inhumane. I think that many people, you can be very cruel by trying to be kind. You can be very you could be very cruel by being respectful. You could be very cruel by being neglectful.
That sounds like it rhymes, actually. It's like a rap. It's like the humanity rap. Nice. I like that,
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't know. It's a very difficult moral question. Do you leave these people to suffer, or do you assume that their way of life is precious and must be protected at all costs? Because if there's something in there that you think is precious and it's going to get tainted anyway, like you said, it's going to get tainted by the fact that the local logging company's encroaching, and they're going to slowly, these tribes are slowly going to insinuate their way into our society anyway. So, isn't it part of our obligation to make sure that they are happy and healthy and not suffering? I don't know.
It's a weird one. I mean, the thing is, being, human nature, and especially sort of humans in a modern context, I guess. I mean, like in Canada and America, when Europeans sort of came over and colonized those places, there were a lot of indigenous tribes living in Canada and America who sort of valued their land. They sort of lived off the land, but they had a very specific and particular way of doing it. They had traditions. They had their own societies and communities and stuff. And what a lot of Europeans did when they came over to Canada and America was they sort of, at first tried to sort of take advantage of them because they had things that they wanted, like, furs and whatever. And they had these abilities to get this stuff that was sought after back in Europe. So they would take advantage of them. But then in more modern times, they sort of, governments sort of took their land and then sort of said, okay, well, we'll give it back, but we're just going to build you a reservation, like, of this land for you to live on that has, like, different laws to the rest of the country or whatever. And I think that, like, if you want to help people, I don't think that that's a great way of doing it either. And that seems to be the only way that they'll do it, like a government would do it. Like, I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't even know if there is an answer. But if you're going to help a bunch of people, I think you have to take the time to understand them first and, be able to give them a reasonable amount of help and not just basically shit all over them. You know what I mean?
I think there is a lack of understanding, but I also think that the first person to get somewhere shouldn't necessarily claim it. Just because the Americans were the first people to land on the moon.
No, but I mean, this is in the 1400s, right? So it's like...
No, listen, I'm not saying that what happened to Native Americans is fine in any way, shape, or form. I don't think it is. I think that it was a terrible series of extreme cruelty and genocide and greed on the part of Europeans, and that the Native Americans had a very horrible, hard time of it. I don't think their lives before we turned up were perfect, but I think that they had a very I mean it was but then again, neither was Europe. The war in Europe was still going on 500 years after all these things, and it will still be going on 100 years into the future, or hundreds of years into the future. I don't expect that we are going to change. I don't think that things have changed. I think that time is this thing where we live in the present, and everyone always assumes they're living in the most civilized, the most correct, the most refined societies on Earth. Okay, we think that right now we are living in the best society that ever has lived, and they're probably true. But in the grand scheme of things, are we really all that good? I think that's a question that we have to ask. I think with Native Americans, they had a very different perception of what land was. They didn't really understand that you could own land. They didn't have this concept of land ownership. So when, the Americans brought that concept to them, and well, the Brits and just British probably, and the French and the Netherlands, when they all brought this concept over of, hey, can we have some of your land? They were like, well, this isn't anyone's land. This is the land that is here. This is they viewed land as a very different concept to what we did. They looked at the world in a very different way to how we did. They lived in harmony with the world, whereas we see the world as a tool that we exploit to exist. Capitalism does not live in harmony with the world. The world has to be bent and broken by us to serve our purposes. And things have to be. I love the way we're saying all this with a backdrop of you going out capturing native population, putting them in basically battery farm things.
Yeah, I know. But got like a silo and everything now. It's fucking sweet, isn't it?
Anyway, I think that the Native Americans. I mean, it's been such a long time that I think that it doesn't necessarily work to pay reparations. For example, I think that the damage. I know the damage has been done, but if for example, my gran was owed a load of money or whatever, I don't feel the need for that necessarily to be passed on to me, and no. I don't feel greed, and I don't think a lot of people do either. I don't think a lot of people expect that.
No.
I mean, obviously there was. If you want to pull values out of the air and say, oh, the amount of land that we owe them this much to pay for all this land at modern land values or whatever, it's just it wasn't like that, and I think that. I don't think that we should necessarily look. What's done is done. I think in history, and I think that we need to continue to be very careful around these topics. Because the last thing I want to do is imply that the Native Americans have had a good time, because they definitely haven't.
But I mean, but that's the thing. Like when you think about these indigenous tribes that live out in the Amazon and whatever as well, trying to help them, we run the same risk of sort of repeating history, not treating them very well. But at the same time, I think maybe they do need some help too, because it doesn't sound like their lives are great. And I'm not sure if...
I think when you look at some of the other tribes as well, like the Australian Aborigines, I think that a lot of them, they're a lower demographic in Australian society. I think they struggle with higher rates of alcoholism and things like this, and struggle with more health problems. I think that they are they're not as lucky as we are. They're certainly not equal with us, and I think that I think that these wounds take a very long time to heal, and it's generations of time. I think when I was young, I assumed that problems were fixable quick. But history has shown that trying to make change quickly is actually very detrimental. I think you could want things that are good. People like Stalin, right? Wanted rapid change for the best, and they thought it would be in the best interests of their country.
But it was same highly oppressive.
Mao Zedong, and even like in North Korea, these people wanted to invoke these manifestos of getting towards a perfect society, but the costs were just so great, and they didn't realize, especially in human life and upheaval. And there's been some really tragic moments in human history, and they've happened because of things trying to take things too fast. I think that we need to we need to make changes, but the changes have to not have to be slow, but we have to accept that there's certain things we cannot change.
Yeah.
Very easily, and that many things will only be changed by generations growing out of problems. And I think that religion is a good example of something which we are slowly growing out of.
Or at least gravitating away from. But I think religion, sort of as it is now, comes with so much baggage, doesn't it? There's so many negative things that you can attribute it to, in the past, sort of thing, that I think people almost mistrust it now. Where before, it was the staple of society, really, wasn't it? At one point, like everyone would go to church. Everybody sort of there was communities developed around your church and stuff like that. I don't know if it's so much like that anymore. I think in general,
No.
I don't think it is anymore. But
Well, listen. I mean, we talked a little bit about this on the board meeting stream because there was some people asked me questions about how I felt about religion, and maybe we can talk about that a bit next time.
okay,
But yeah,
I'm
I'd
game.
like to.
I'm game if you are.
I have got a few feelings about it, and it's in line with the kind of things we said today. But I think that these societies, wow, it goes really deep, really quick. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's
We've
fine.
talked about some interesting stuff lately.
It's been nice, actually. We talked about poop, but we also talked about some cool stuff.
Yeah, oh, man. Thanks for bringing up that documentary. It's
Yeah,
pretty
you
cool.
should check it out. It was I can't even remember what it's called now. That's how much of an asshole I am.
Is it some like Steve Parry guy or whatever?
It was
I
like
don't
no,
know,
I
out
think
there.
it was on like BBC or
name?
something. And I think the documentary is going to be on Channel 4.
Was he a British guy?
Yeah, he's a British guy. Yeah.
Does he like always have his top off?
He had his top off in the shots where he was out in the Amazon. Yeah, and he had a big beard as well.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'll tune in.
Be on the lookout for a man with a big beard and no top on in the Amazon rainforest. No, it looked interesting though. It looked really
I
good.
can't wait.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and stay healthy and frosty, and hasta la vista, Lewis.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye.